Here in part 2 of our series of videos on the one-way ANOVA with repeated measures, we're going to focus on determining our between elements for our analysis of variance. And the between source of variation, or time, examines the deviation as a function of time between 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. And the way we do that is by comparing each time point average against the grand mean, which we had determined to be 20.78. So I'm just going to scroll over here to the right, and we have our sum of squares for time, and that's where we first determine the deviation at each time point, or the average at each time point, and the grand mean. We square that deviation value, repeat that for all the time points, then we add them all up and multiply it by the sample size, which is n. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to start that process right now. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the squared deviation term at each time point. And I'm just going to hit the equal sign. I'm going to shift 9. I'm going to take the difference between this value, so I'm going to click the average I want. I'm going to hit the dash for the subtraction, and I'm going to click the grand mean. I'm going to shift 0, I'm going to close that, and then I'm going to shift 6, and I'm going to put the number 2, because I'm raising that difference to the power of 2. Now before I complete this, before I'm going to come back here, I hit the enter prematurely. Let's go up to the formula bar, and so for G12 here, that's where the grand mean is. I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to put the dollar sign. So I'm going to shift 4 in front of the G, I'm going to move over and I'm going to put the dollar sign, shift 4 in front of the 12. And what that's going to do is that's going to lock in the G12 value. So I'm just going to grab this bottom right hand corner and I'm going to pull it across for the different time points. So we see here that I'm going to click this last cell and we double check that we have F12, which is the average at 15 minutes, subtract G12 squared. So that worked well, and now we have all of those deviation values from the grand mean. So the next step is to add up all of these deviation values. In other words, we're going to sum the squares for the between. So I'm just going to put that value in right here, and I'm going to hit the equal sign and type SUM. I'm going to shift 9 and I'm going to highlight all of these cells. I'm going to shift 0 and I'm going to hit enter. Now that's the sum of squares for the time source of variation. So let's double check our equation. So what we just did is we added up all of the time points. There were 5 time points, but we still have one more step, is we have to multiply that by our correction factor, which is our sample size. So let's come back over to our equation. We need to modify our equation, and I'm going to go up to the formula bar. I'm going to make that active. I'm going to shift 8 for the asterisk, which is the multiplication symbol, and I'm going to hit the number 10 because that's my sample size, and I hit enter. And now we have our sum of squares between term. The next thing to do is to calculate our degrees of freedom between. So let's go and let's reference that equation. And so the degrees of freedom for time, which is our between term, is a t minus 1, or the number of time points minus 1. So I can see I have 5 time points, and I'm going to subtract 1 from that. So I could type in the number 4, or I can just type in the equation 5 minus 1, and that gives me a 4. Now the next step is to calculate the mean square, or the variance, for the between term, and I'm going to put that value right here. So once again, let's double check our equations. So the mean square for time is the sum of squares for time divided by its respective degree of freedom. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to hit the equal sign, and I'm going to take my sum of squares. I'm going to hit the forward slash, and I'm going to highlight the cell with my degrees of freedom. I hit enter, and now we have the variance term for the between source of variation, or the time factor. So this ends this video on how to calculate just the between source of variation.